Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for staying up with us tonight. It's the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani. Got a lot to get into tonight with our panel. We will get into the Pitt Panthers, who are now looking possibly of turning a 3-0 season into something that falls under 500 based on yesterday. We'll talk about that. The Penguins, their roster, is it better now or is it better when they ended the season? But the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the Steelers and another win. The first time since 1979 they're 4-0. Here to discuss is your panel. Rich Walsh joins me over in Studio B. We also have Jeff Hathhorn from 93.7 The Fan, sports director up there, and Mark Kaboly from The Athletic, Steeler beat writer, down the bottom portion of your screen. All right, so guys, let's get into this. Steelers are 4-0. That's a good thing. There are some correctable items that need to go on, obviously, when you give up that many points. But Mark, we'll start with you on this. Chase Claypool is now what to the Steelers in terms of depth chart on wide receiver? Because a lot of people on Twitter, and of course Twitter wants immediate reaction. There are a lot of reasons why Chase Claypool is doing what he's doing. He's a smart kid. He's an athletic kid. Is he now the #1 receiver on this team?
No, absolutely not, because I think Tomlin said it perfectly afterwards. They have so many different weapons right here, and you saw it throughout the first month of the season where it's just going to depend on the game. I mean, Juju's going to show up one week. Deontay Johnson's going to show up one week. Maybe James Washington in the future here, just because Claypool looked very good today. And, most of those catches were, wide open type of situations where the quarterback put him in good positions. Not to take anything away from Claypool, but I don't think you could sit here and like years past and label him 1, 2, 3, or 4, because I think they got a bunch of 2s, to be honest with you. They don't have that 1, and I don't think they have many 3s or 4s either. So I don't think we need to sit here and label one guy a #1 just off of 1 week's of work.
First of all, I want to start by saying, man, I was wrong about the J.K. Dobbins, Chase Claypool.
Yes, you were
argument.
wrong, Richie.
The guy below me, Mark Kaboly, hammers me on Twitter all the time now. So I take that back. Chase Claypool was definitely the right pick after what I saw today. I agree with Mark there that he is not the #1 receiver yet, but I think he's trending in the right direction, obviously. I don't think he really has a total grasp of the playbook yet. He's getting there, but he has a good relationship, it seems like, with Ben Roethlisberger. I guess both of those have become close over the last couple of months, and they've developed a pretty good relationship, which is going to help everyone on this team. So I really was impressed with what he did today, not only stats-wise and the touchdowns, but he did it out there without Deontay Johnson for most of the game.
Yeah, I go along with what Mark was saying. He took advantage of the opportunities and the matchups that he was given, but you still have to complete those opportunities. I mean, you can't just go out there and sleepwalk, or, you could drop passes. He still had to take care, had to be in the right spot, and obviously had to get the passes from Ben Roethlisberger. What I like about Chase Claypool is he was a quick study. He came in great shape, and Roethlisberger said after, he doesn't make the same mistake twice. If you get an athlete like that, he's going to be a star in this league. He may not be their #1 receiver right now, but he's obviously got the most potential, and I think he's their biggest threat if Deontay Johnson isn't healthy.
Here's the other thing. Juju Smith-Schuster is now getting a lot of different coverages as well. Double covered a lot, and that opens up avenues for other guys, and I think that's good for guys like Chase Claypool. Mark, I want to talk about Ben Roethlisberger, because I think we're not talking enough about him. This is 4 games now. He had a 27 for 34 day, no picks, 3 touchdowns, managed that game extremely well. People wondered at the beginning of the season what we would see from a guy coming off elbow surgery. What have you seen?
I don't really care about his elbow right now. And he even mentioned that his long ball, his deep pass hasn't been there. You know what? I don't really care about that right now, because he's winning in so many other ways, in ways that we should be jumping out and slapping us in the face because of what we saw last year with Rudolph and Hodges. I mean, look at that last play, that last touchdown to Chase Claypool. He came to the line. He knew what was going on. He made call here, moved guys around, and made the play. And that's not the only time he's doing that. He's making the right calls at the right point. He's getting them into plays that work. He's not forcing the ball. I think where his best attribute has been for this past month has been right here between the 2 ears. I mean, he's not making any mental mistakes. The physicality of that arm might not always be back, but as long as he's out there and being able to run that offense like he is, they're going to be a tough beat.
You know what, Mark? Maybe the biggest thing here is he's not forcing the ball to anyone. The last time we really saw him in a season was with Antonio Brown, right? And he had to get him the ball all the time. Well, right now, it doesn't seem like these guys, they all obviously want the ball, but you don't see a lot of selfishness out there. And I think that plays a big part of it, too. And you talked about making the right decision with Claypool there a little bit earlier in the game to Claypool, that the call that was overturned, and then they ended up going the other way after the fumble. That was a good decision right there, going after seeing a bad matchup with Claypool, a new corner, and they throw right at him, and he comes back to make the catch. So I just like the relationship that they have right now. Another thing I really like about Claypool, he's a very even-keel guy. We've all talked to him a bunch of times. He doesn't get too high, and he doesn't get too low.
Hey, if Roethlisberger doesn't play in this game today, the Steelers don't win. So I think that speaks to his value right there. 2, 3 for 3 in the red zone. There's another stat that's directly attributable to the quarterback, plus 73% on third down. Those are the type of stats you like to see from your quarterback. He didn't even throw for 300 yards, but it's what Mark said. It's those lack of mistakes. It's making those adjustments, but capitalizing in the red zone and also getting the first down conversion on third down. Big points in Ben's favor today.
All right,
Just
listen,
think
I have
about-
1 minute and 30
guys.
seconds left here, so I have to get this quick. Rich, you first. 130 total for all three.
Okay.
Matt Canada. I think I give a lot of credit for Randy Fichtner because he's allowing a lot of good ideas come in. Talk about Canada's presence in this offense.
I love it. I loved it when he was here at Pitt. Does all the misdirection. Remember when he had Quadri Henderson running all over the place? Well, they potentially have that here with a bunch of different guys. I like the mix, and I like that Fichtner and Ben Roethlisberger all are encouraging it, and I think it's going to be good. It's obviously, we've seen it's good for this offense right now.
I think Coach
Well, Ben
Randy
is willing to learn.
I was going to say, Jeff, I think Coach Randy's having one heck of a couple games here just with the play call. You can bring Matt Canada in all you want and all different type of offensive and give you suggestions. He's the one holding the call sheet. He's holding the play sheet. He's the one making the calls here. He's been absolutely fabulous. And what I like about the Canada offense is it showed up today or Sunday. Doesn't mean it's going to show up tomorrow or next week. And I think that gives them a lot of versatility.
Well, to Mark's point, it's not the Canada offense, it's the Fichtner offense. And they were able to keep some of the things that Ben liked, but the new things that Canada has brought in have paid dividends early for the Steelers.
Steelers certainly defensively have a lot of things that they lead the league in. However, they're not leading the league in touchdown receptions against and yards. They're giving up a lot of big plays, especially on third down. Why is that? We'll discuss when we come back and also get you set for the Browns and Steelers. The next game up right here on KDKA-TV. We'll talk about it next on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown.